There is a reason some people walk into a room and instantly command respect without saying a single word, while others spend years trying to impress everyone and still feel invisible. It isn't because they are better looking. It isn't because they are wealthier or more successful. It is because they possess something far more powerful, an inner strength that cannot be borrowed, bought, or faked. The truth is, people are not naturally drawn to perfection. They are drawn to certainty. They are drawn to individuals who remain calm when others panic, who stay true to themselves when everyone else is seeking approval, and who refuse to let temporary emotions control permanent decisions. The problem is that most of us were never taught how to build that kind of presence. We were taught how to fit in, how to avoid rejection, and how to seek validation from people who may not even know themselves. We learned to measure our worth through compliments, attention, and acceptance. But the more we depend on the opinions of others, the more disconnected we become from our own character. Without realizing it, we begin living a life designed to be admired instead of a life built on principles. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world filled our minds with endless comparison and constant distraction. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus all taught that the strongest person is not the one who controls other people, but the one who has learned to govern their own mind. Stoicism reminds us that true confidence is quiet, true discipline is consistent, and true freedom begins the moment you stop allowing the outside world to determine your inner peace. That wisdom is just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago, because human nature has never stopped searching for certainty in uncertain times. In today's conversation, we're going to explore 7 powerful habits that quietly make a person both attractive and mentally strong. These are not manipulation techniques or social tricks designed to make people chase you. They are timeless principles that strengthen your character, deepen your confidence, and create a presence that speaks long before your words ever do. As each habit becomes part of your daily life, you'll notice something remarkable. You will spend less time trying to earn respect and more time becoming someone who naturally deserves it. If these conversations inspire you to build a calmer mind, stronger character, and a life guided by wisdom instead of impulse, consider subscribing and becoming part of this journey. Every video is an opportunity to practice Stoicism, challenge your thinking, and take one more step toward becoming the person you were always capable of becoming. Have you ever met someone who barely spoke, yet everyone respected them? Someone who never begged for attention, never chased conversations, never tried to prove themselves, yet their presence seemed to command quiet admiration wherever they went. There was something different about them. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't coldness. It wasn't mystery for the sake of appearing mysterious. It was certainty. They had built a life that did not depend on convincing everyone else of their value. They knew who they were before entering the room, and because of that, they never needed the room to tell them. That kind of presence is available to anyone willing to develop the habits that create it. These habits are not tricks for becoming popular. They are not manipulative techniques designed to make people chase you. In fact, they often produce the opposite effect at first. They require patience, discipline, and the willingness to disappoint people who benefited from your insecurity. But over time, something remarkable begins to happen. As your mind becomes stronger, your presence becomes more attractive. As your emotional dependence disappears, your confidence becomes effortless. As you stop seeking validation, you begin receiving genuine respect without asking for it. That is the strange paradox of life. The things we chase often run away from us, while the things we quietly cultivate within ourselves naturally draw others closer. Today's conversation is about 7 habits that quietly transform ordinary people into individuals who radiate confidence, emotional stability, and quiet strength. These habits will not only make you more attractive to others, but far more importantly, they will make you someone you genuinely admire when you are alone. Because the greatest relationship you will ever build is the one you have with yourself. Everything else grows from there. The first habit is learning to stop chasing approval. This sounds simple, but it may be one of the hardest changes a person can make because the desire to be accepted is deeply rooted in human nature. Since childhood, many of us have been rewarded for pleasing others. We learned to smile even when we were uncomfortable. We learned to apologize for things that were never our fault. We learned to stay quiet to avoid conflict and to say yes when our hearts desperately wanted to say no. Little by little, we became experts at reading everyone else's emotions while completely ignoring our own. We became skilled at maintaining peace around us while quietly losing peace within ourselves. The danger of constantly seeking approval is that it teaches you to abandon yourself in exchange for temporary acceptance. You begin shaping your personality depending on who stands in front of you. Around one group, you become quieter. Around another, you become more entertaining. Around someone you admire, you suddenly begin pretending to enjoy things that never interested you before. Eventually, you become so focused on fitting into every environment that you no longer remember who you actually are when nobody else is watching. People often believe this behavior makes them more likable, but the opposite is usually true. Human beings are naturally drawn toward authenticity. Even if they cannot explain why, they instinctively recognize when someone is acting from genuine confidence versus hidden insecurity. Someone who constantly seeks approval creates invisible pressure in every interaction. Their words begin carrying an unspoken question. Do you like me? Did I say the right thing? Am I enough? Others may never hear those questions spoken aloud, but they feel them. And because of that, the interaction becomes emotionally exhausting rather than inspiring. Contrast this with someone who accepts themselves before seeking acceptance from others. They do not need every conversation to end with admiration. They do not panic when someone disagrees with them. They do not lose sleep because one person misunderstood their intentions. They understand that disagreement is part of life, rejection is unavoidable, and universal approval is impossible. Ironically, this relaxed confidence makes people feel safer around them. They are not trying to extract validation from the relationship. They are simply sharing who they genuinely are. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that trying to control another person's opinion was a waste of precious energy. Every moment spent obsessing over someone else's judgment was a moment stolen from building one's own character. This shift changes everything. Instead of asking, "How can I make them like me?" you begin asking, "Did I act according to my principles?" That single question returns control to where it belongs. Suddenly, your success is no longer measured by applause, but by integrity. Imagine waking up every morning without feeling the need to prove your worth. Imagine entering conversations without rehearsing every sentence in your mind. Imagine posting nothing simply to receive attention, saying no without guilt, walking away from disrespect without explaining yourself, and allowing people to misunderstand you if correcting them would require sacrificing your dignity. That freedom cannot be purchased. It can only be earned through repeated acts of self-respect. Many people mistake self-respect for selfishness because they have spent their entire lives believing that love must be earned through constant sacrifice. But there is a profound difference between kindness and self-abandonment. Kindness is freely chosen. Self-abandonment is driven by fear. Kindness leaves you feeling peaceful. Self-abandonment leaves you feeling resentful. One comes from abundance, the other comes from scarcity. This is why emotionally strong people rarely over-explain themselves. They know that every unnecessary explanation is often an unconscious attempt to gain approval. They understand that not every accusation deserves a defense, and not every misunderstanding requires correction. Sometimes silence protects your peace more effectively than the most carefully crafted argument ever could. Epictetus believed that people reveal their character not through what they claim, but through how consistently they live. The same principle applies here. Your life will always speak louder than your explanations. Think about someone who genuinely impressed you. Chances are it wasn't because they constantly talked about their confidence. It was because they demonstrated it quietly. They remained calm under pressure. They treated everyone with respect without becoming a people pleaser. They accepted criticism without collapsing emotionally. They admitted mistakes without feeling humiliated. They did not need to appear perfect because their identity was not built upon perfection, it was built upon growth. This habit takes time because the approval-seeking mind has been practicing its patterns for years, sometimes decades. At first, saying no will feel uncomfortable. Setting boundaries will make you question yourself. Declining invitations will bring guilt. Choosing your own path may feel lonely. But every time you honor your values instead of chasing acceptance, something powerful happens inside your mind. Your self-trust grows. Confidence is nothing more than accumulated evidence that you can rely on yourself. Every decision that aligns with your principles becomes another piece of evidence. Eventually, you stop asking others whether you are enough because your own actions have already answered that question. There is an invisible strength that begins to emerge when approval no longer controls your choices. You become harder to manipulate because flattery loses its power over you. Criticism loses much of its sting because your identity is rooted deeper than another person's opinion. Rejection becomes information rather than devastation. Failure becomes education rather than humiliation. This emotional stability creates a magnetic presence that no amount of forced charisma can ever imitate. People often spend years searching for confidence as though it were some mysterious feeling that arrives one morning without warning. But confidence is not a feeling. It is the natural consequence of repeatedly keeping promises to yourself. Every time you honor your values instead of abandoning them for temporary acceptance, you strengthen the foundation of your identity. Eventually, that foundation becomes so solid that the opinions of others feel like passing weather rather than permanent reality. Perhaps the greatest irony of all is this: the moment you genuinely stop needing everyone's approval is often the moment people begin respecting you more. Not because you became colder or less compassionate, but because your kindness is no longer driven by fear. It becomes intentional, it becomes genuine, it becomes impossible to exploit, and people can feel that difference immediately, even if they cannot explain it. This first habit is where everything else begins. Without it, every other attempt at personal growth becomes another performance designed to earn applause. With it, every habit that follows becomes an authentic expression of the person you are becoming. True attractiveness has never started with appearance. It begins with self-respect, and self-respect begins the moment you decide that your peace is worth more than someone else's temporary approval. The remaining habits build upon this foundation, each strengthening your mind while quietly transforming the way the world responds to your presence. By the time these habits become part of your daily life, you will discover something extraordinary. You no longer need to convince people that you are valuable because your character will do the talking long before your words ever have. The second habit that quietly transforms both your attractiveness and your mental strength is learning to master your emotions instead of being mastered by them. There is a misconception that emotionally strong people simply do not feel deeply. They appear calm during conflict, composed in disappointment and steady under pressure. So many assume they have somehow become immune to pain. But the truth is almost the opposite. They feel everything that everyone else feels. They experience rejection, fear, anger, embarrassment, grief, and uncertainty just like anyone else. The difference is that they have trained themselves not to hand the steering wheel of their lives over to those emotions. They recognize every feeling, but they refuse to let every feeling become a command. One of the greatest misunderstandings of our generation is the belief that every emotion deserves immediate expression. We are encouraged to react instantly, defend ourselves immediately, respond to every message, correct every misunderstanding, and answer every criticism before we have even taken a full breath. As a result, many people spend their lives living in reaction rather than intention. Their mood changes according to the latest conversation. Their confidence depends on the latest compliment. Their peace disappears because of one careless comment from someone they barely know. Without realizing it, they become emotional prisoners, constantly waiting for the outside world to decide how they should feel. The Stoics viewed emotions very differently. They never suggested suppressing them or pretending they did not exist. Instead, they believed that emotion should be observed before it is obeyed. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that events themselves are rarely the source of suffering. It is the story we immediately attach to those events that creates most of our pain. Two people can experience the same rejection. One concludes, "I will never be enough." The other quietly says, "This wasn't meant for me." The event is identical. The interpretation changes everything. This simple shift is one of the greatest sources of mental strength. Instead of asking, "Why do I feel this?" emotionally resilient people begin asking, "What is this feeling trying to teach me?" Suddenly, anger becomes information instead of destruction. Fear becomes preparation instead of paralysis. Sadness becomes reflection instead of permanent identity. Every emotion has something valuable to offer, but only if you refuse to let it become your master. Think back to the people who have impressed you the most throughout your life. Chances are they were not individuals who never faced adversity. They were people who remained remarkably composed while facing it. When others panicked, they slowed down. When everyone else argued, they lowered their voice. When life became uncertain, they became more intentional instead of more chaotic. Their calmness was not accidental, it was practiced. They understood that composure is not something you discover during difficult moments. It is something you build during ordinary days. Every single day gives you opportunities to train emotional discipline. Someone interrupts you, someone ignores your message, someone speaks disrespectfully, someone gets credit for work you contributed to, someone criticizes your decisions. Most people react immediately because their emotions convince them that immediate action equals strength. Yet more often than not, immediate reaction is simply untrained emotion wearing the mask of confidence. There is incredible power in creating space between what happens and how you respond. That small pause may last only a few seconds, but within those seconds your entire future changes. During that pause, you reclaim your freedom. You stop becoming someone who is controlled by circumstances and start becoming someone guided by principles. Epictetus believed that while we cannot always choose what happens to us, we can always choose the meaning we assign to it. That choice is where true freedom lives. Modern psychology supports this ancient wisdom. Researchers have repeatedly found that emotionally resilient people are not those who experience fewer negative emotions, but those who recover more quickly from them. Recovery is a skill. It is built through awareness, perspective, and repeated practice. Instead of asking why life is happening to them, mentally strong people ask how they can grow through it. This shift transforms suffering into education. Imagine two co-workers receiving harsh criticism from their manager. One spends the rest of the week replaying every word, questioning their abilities, complaining to everyone who will listen, and carrying that emotional weight home every evening. The other listens carefully, separates useful feedback from unnecessary harshness, improves where improvement is needed, and then lets the rest go. Both received the same criticism, One became emotionally exhausted, the other became emotionally stronger. The difference was never the criticism, it was the response. This is why emotionally disciplined people rarely make important decisions while overwhelmed by anger, fear, or excitement. They know that temporary emotions create permanent mistakes. A single impulsive text can destroy years of trust. One emotional purchase can create months of financial stress. One angry conversation can permanently damage a valuable relationship. They understand that emotions are excellent advisors but terrible rulers. Seneca once observed that anger often punishes us more severely than the person who originally offended us. That truth remains painfully relevant today. Think about how much energy people waste replaying arguments that ended days ago. The other person may have already forgotten the conversation while they continue reliving it repeatedly inside their own mind. They believe they are holding on to justice, but in reality, they are holding on to suffering. One of the quietest forms of attractiveness is emotional consistency. People naturally feel safe around individuals whose moods are not constantly swinging from one extreme to another. They know where they stand. They do not feel as though they must walk on eggshells. This consistency builds trust because it demonstrates maturity. It tells others that your behavior is governed by your values rather than your impulses. This does not mean becoming emotionally cold. Quite the opposite. Emotionally mature people often display tremendous warmth, compassion, humor, and affection. The difference is that these qualities arise from conscious choice rather than emotional instability. They can be deeply kind without becoming emotionally dependent. They can love someone without losing themselves. They can care deeply while still protecting their peace. Many people confuse emotional intensity with emotional depth. They believe dramatic reactions prove that feelings are genuine. Yet some of the deepest people you will ever meet express themselves with remarkable calmness. They have learned that love does not require chaos. Confidence does not require loudness. Strength does not require aggression. Their emotions have become servants of wisdom rather than masters of behavior. Developing this habit requires daily observation of your own mind. Begin noticing the moments when your emotions try to rush you into action. Observe how quickly embarrassment wants you to hide, how anger urges you to attack, how fear whispers that you should quit before trying, and how insecurity encourages you to compare yourself with everyone around you. Instead of immediately obeying those voices, simply notice them. Awareness weakens impulses. The moment you become the observer instead of the participant, your emotions begin losing their control over you. There is another powerful reason emotional mastery makes you more attractive. It demonstrates self-possession. The world is full of people who can only remain pleasant when life goes exactly as planned. But someone who remains gracious during disappointment, humble during success, and calm during uncertainty communicates something much more valuable. They communicate reliability. Others instinctively recognize that this is someone who can be trusted during difficult times. That quiet reliability is infinitely more attractive than temporary charm. Have you ever noticed that people often regret the things they said while emotional, but rarely regret the moments when they chose patience? Silence has prevented countless unnecessary conflicts. Reflection has saved countless relationships. Time has dissolved countless problems that once seemed urgent. Emotional maturity is not about winning every argument. It is about refusing to lose yourself in arguments that were never worth your peace. Every challenge life places before you becomes an opportunity to strengthen this habit. Delayed flights, unexpected setbacks, financial pressure, family disagreements, professional disappointments. None of these situations asks whether you are capable of staying calm. They reveal whether you have already practiced calmness before the challenge arrived. Character is never created in the storm, it is revealed there. As you continue developing emotional discipline, something remarkable begins happening inside your relationships. You stop seeking people who constantly rescue your emotions because you have learned to regulate them yourself. You become less attracted to drama because peace finally feels more fulfilling than excitement. You stop interpreting every disagreement as rejection and every criticism as proof of inadequacy. Life becomes lighter, not because fewer problems exist, but because fewer problems gain control over your inner world. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he reminded himself that the mind can remain unconquered unless it chooses surrender. Circumstances may become difficult, people may disappoint you, plans may fall apart, but your inner character remains yours to protect. No one can steal your peace without your cooperation. Eventually, emotional discipline stops feeling like effort. It becomes your natural way of moving through the world. You listen more carefully, you speak more thoughtfully, you forgive more easily, you recover more quickly. You stop allowing temporary emotions to write permanent chapters of your life, and people notice. They may never know exactly why they feel drawn toward your presence, but they will sense the quiet stability that so many spend their entire lives searching for. Because true strength has never been measured by how loudly someone reacts. It has always been measured by how peacefully they remain when life gives them every reason not to. And that peaceful strength is impossible to fake. It is earned one thoughtful response at a time until eventually your calmness becomes one of the most attractive qualities you possess. The third habit goes even deeper, because once you have learned to stop chasing approval and mastered your emotional reactions, you begin discovering a kind of freedom that very few people ever experience. The freedom that comes from becoming completely comfortable with your own company. The third habit that makes you quietly attractive and mentally unshakable is becoming comfortable with being alone. This may be one of the most misunderstood forms of strength in today's world. The moment someone chooses solitude over constant social activity, people often assume something must be wrong. They imagine loneliness, sadness, or isolation. Yet there is an enormous difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Loneliness is the pain of believing something essential is missing. Solitude is the peace of discovering that nothing essential has ever been outside of you in the first place. Most people never experience true solitude because they are constantly surrounded by noise. If they are not talking to someone, they are listening to something. If they are not checking messages, they are scrolling through endless content. Every quiet moment becomes an opportunity to distract themselves from their own thoughts. Silence feels uncomfortable because silence forces them to meet the one person they have spent years avoiding, themselves. The Stoics deliberately sought moments of solitude because they understood something that modern life often encourages us to forget. You cannot build a strong mind while constantly borrowing the thoughts, emotions, and expectations of everyone around you. Your character needs silence the same way a seed needs darkness before it can grow. Without moments of reflection, you spend your entire life reacting instead of understanding. You become familiar with everyone else's opinions while remaining a stranger to your own. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the largest empires in history, surrounded by advisors, soldiers, politicians, and endless responsibilities. Yet some of his deepest reflections were written during quiet moments when he was completely alone with his own mind. He understood that leadership begins with self-leadership. Before you can influence the world around you, you must first become capable of governing your own thoughts. One of the greatest fears many people carry is not failure, rejection, or criticism. It is silence. Silence removes every distraction that normally protects us from facing our insecurities. Suddenly, there are no conversations to hide behind, no entertainment to numb uncomfortable feelings, and no external validation temporarily boosting our confidence. There is only the truth. At first, that truth can feel intimidating. But if you stay long enough, it becomes incredibly liberating. The people who cannot enjoy their own company often place impossible pressure on everyone else's company. They expect relationships to heal wounds that only self-awareness can heal. They expect friendships to provide constant reassurance. They expect romantic partners to eliminate every insecurity. But no relationship, no matter how healthy, can permanently solve a problem that begins within your own mind. Eventually, the burden becomes too heavy for both people involved. Emotionally mature people understand that relationships should enrich an already meaningful life, not become the entire source of meaning itself. Because they are comfortable alone, they choose people instead of needing them. That difference changes everything. Their love becomes freer, their friendships become healthier, their conversations become more genuine because they are no longer driven by desperation or fear of abandonment. Have you ever noticed how some people cannot go a single day without seeking attention? If nobody messages them, they become anxious. If nobody compliments them, they begin questioning their worth. If they spend a weekend alone, they immediately feel as though something must be wrong. This constant need for external stimulation slowly weakens the mind because it teaches dependence instead of resilience. Now think about someone who enjoys spending an afternoon reading, walking, learning a new skill, exercising, or simply sitting with their thoughts. They are not hiding from the world. They are preparing themselves for it. Every hour spent developing themselves quietly increases the quality of every future conversation they will have. They become more thoughtful because they spend time thinking. They become more interesting because they spend time learning. They become more peaceful because they stop running away from themselves. One of the hidden benefits of solitude is clarity. Noise creates confusion. Silence creates understanding. How many poor decisions have been made simply because someone was afraid of sitting alone long enough to hear their own intuition? People remain in unhealthy relationships because being alone feels scarier than being unhappy. They stay in careers that drain them because constant activity distracts them from asking difficult questions. They continue living according to expectations they never consciously chose because they never slow down long enough to examine whether those expectations actually belong to them. Epictetus believed that no one is free who cannot command themselves. Solitude is where that command begins. During quiet moments, you begin noticing how often your thoughts chase comparison, how frequently your mind imagines worst-case scenarios, and how easily old memories still influence present decisions. None of this becomes obvious while constantly distracted. Self-awareness grows in stillness. There is another reason people who embrace solitude appear naturally attractive. They radiate emotional independence. They are not constantly looking around the room, hoping someone notices them. They do not interrupt conversations simply to remain the center of attention. They are perfectly capable of enjoying a gathering without needing to become its main character. Ironically, this relaxed confidence often draws people toward them because genuine self-contentment is surprisingly rare. People instinctively trust those who are not desperately trying to gain something from them. Someone who is comfortable alone enters relationships with openness instead of neediness. They listen because they are interested, not because they are waiting for approval. They give compliments because they genuinely admire others, not because they expect something in return. Their generosity feels authentic because it comes from abundance rather than emotional scarcity. This habit also protects you from manipulation. Individuals who fear loneliness are often willing to tolerate disrespect simply to avoid being alone. They ignore red flags, excuse unhealthy behavior, and repeatedly sacrifice their dignity because the alternative feels unbearable. Manipulative people recognize this fear almost immediately. They know that someone terrified of losing relationships becomes easier to control. But the person who has learned to enjoy solitude becomes remarkably difficult to manipulate. They are grateful for meaningful relationships, but they never cling to them out of fear. If respect disappears, they are capable of walking away. If trust is repeatedly broken, they leave without feeling that their life has ended. Their peace is no longer held hostage by another person's decisions. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant or building walls around your heart. Healthy solitude actually makes deeper relationships possible because you stop expecting others to carry responsibilities that belong to you. Instead of asking someone else to complete you, you arrive already whole. Two whole people create a healthier relationship than two incomplete people desperately trying to repair each other. Many of history's greatest thinkers, artists, philosophers, and leaders intentionally created periods of solitude because creativity flourishes when the mind is no longer overwhelmed by constant input. Ideas need space, wisdom needs reflection, character needs quiet repetition. Every meaningful transformation begins privately long before it becomes visible publicly. Consider the difference between a tree growing in the middle of an open field and one growing in a crowded forest. The tree with room to grow develops deeper roots and a stronger trunk because it has the space to become what it was designed to be. Human beings are remarkably similar. Without moments of intentional solitude, your identity becomes entangled with everyone else's expectations. You forget which dreams belong to you and which were simply inherited from society. Modern technology has made physical connection easier than ever before, yet many people feel more disconnected from themselves than at any other time in history. Every idle moment is filled with another notification, another opinion, another distraction demanding attention. We know what celebrities ate for breakfast, but cannot honestly answer the question, what kind of person am I becoming? Solitude restores that conversation. One simple habit can begin changing this immediately. Spend a small portion of every day without music, without your phone, without conversation, and without any need to produce something. Walk outside. Sit quietly. Journal honestly. Observe your thoughts without judging them. At first, your mind may feel restless because it has become addicted to constant stimulation, but gradually the noise begins settling. Underneath that noise, you discover something that has always been waiting for you: clarity. You begin noticing what truly matters. Problems that once seemed enormous become surprisingly small. Goals that once felt impossible become manageable because your attention is no longer scattered in 100 different directions. You stop comparing your behind-the-scenes life to everyone else's carefully edited highlights because your attention returns to the only life you can actually shape, your own. There is also tremendous courage in learning to enjoy your own company because it means your happiness is no longer dependent on circumstances being perfect. A quiet evening becomes fulfilling instead of disappointing. A cancelled plan becomes an opportunity instead of a frustration. Waiting no longer feels like wasted time because you have learned that your own presence is enough. People often underestimate how attractive this quality truly is. Someone who is genuinely content alone carries themselves differently. Their conversations are calmer, their laughter feels lighter. Their confidence is less performative because it is not constantly seeking confirmation. They do not chase. They do not cling. They do not force connections that are not meant to exist. They allow relationships to develop naturally because they already know that their peace does not disappear when they are by themselves. Seneca once observed that the greatest wealth is learning to be satisfied with little. That wisdom extends far beyond material possessions. One of the richest people in the world is someone who has learned to enjoy their own mind. They carry an endless source of peace wherever they go because they no longer depend on constant entertainment, endless approval, or perpetual distraction to feel complete. Eventually, solitude stops feeling like something you endure. It becomes something you protect. You begin looking forward to those quiet moments because they remind you who you really are beneath every role you play for the outside world. Parent, employee, friend, partner, leader. These roles are important, but they are not your identity. Beneath all of them exists the person who must live with your decisions every single day. Solitude strengthens that relationship, and once that relationship becomes strong, something extraordinary begins happening. You stop fearing abandonment because you know you will never abandon yourself again. That quiet certainty changes the way you walk into every room, every conversation, and every challenge life places before you. People notice it without understanding why. They simply sense that your confidence does not come from the crowd. It comes from within. This inner freedom prepares you for the fourth habit, perhaps one of the rarest qualities in an age where everyone feels compelled to constantly express themselves. Because truly attractive and mentally strong people understand that power is not found in speaking more. More often than not, it is found in knowing exactly when not to speak at all. The fourth habit that makes you naturally attractive and mentally strong is learning to speak less while saying more. We live in a world where everyone is trying to be heard. People rush to share every opinion, defend every criticism, and explain every decision they make. Silence has become uncomfortable because many people believe that if they are not constantly speaking, they are losing influence. But the opposite is often true. The people who carry the most quiet authority are usually the ones who have learned that words gain value when they are used with intention. Think about the wisest person you know. They probably are not the loudest in every conversation. They listen carefully before responding. They ask thoughtful questions. When they finally speak, people naturally pay attention because they know those words were chosen rather than scattered. Their silence creates weight behind every sentence. Marcus Aurelius rarely wasted energy trying to convince everyone he was right. He understood that your character is a far stronger argument than your voice. Many people spend hours defending themselves while neglecting the one thing that truly changes opinions, the way they consistently live. You do not have to explain your growth to people who refuse to see it. Your actions will eventually speak louder than your explanations ever could. Speaking less also protects your emotional energy. Every unnecessary argument steals your peace. Every attempt to change someone's fixed opinion drains attention that could have been invested in improving your own life. Mentally strong people know that not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Sometimes walking away is wiser than winning. This habit also makes you a better listener. Most people listen only long enough to prepare their next response. Truly confident people listen to understand. They become curious instead of defensive. As a result, they notice details others completely miss. They understand people more deeply because they spend less time thinking about what they are going to say next. There is another hidden benefit to speaking less. You become far more difficult to manipulate. The less you reveal impulsively, the less material others have to use against you. Your decisions become more thoughtful because they are made privately before they are announced publicly. Quiet people often appear mysterious, but what others call mystery is usually just discipline. This does not mean becoming silent all the time. It means making your words count. Speak with kindness, but do not speak merely to fill silence. Offer encouragement, but do not offer promises you cannot keep. Share your thoughts, but only after you have truly considered them. The goal is not fewer words for the sake of appearing wise. The goal is meaningful words that reflect a peaceful and disciplined mind. Over time, people begin to trust someone whose words consistently match their actions. They know that when you make a promise, you intend to keep it. When you offer advice, it comes from experience rather than ego. When you choose silence, it is because you value peace more than proving a point. In a noisy world, quiet confidence stands out more than loud attention ever will, and once you master your words, you begin mastering something even more powerful, your standards. Because the fifth habit is learning to keep your standards higher than your emotions. The fifth habit that makes you both attractive and mentally strong is keeping your standards higher than your emotions. Most people make important decisions based on how they feel in the moment. When they feel motivated, they work hard. When they feel discouraged, they quit. When they feel lonely, they lower their standards. When they feel angry, they say things they later regret. Their emotions become the compass that directs their lives. Mentally strong people live differently. They understand that emotions are temporary, but values are lasting. They do not skip the gym because they are not in the mood. They do not tolerate disrespect because they fear being alone. They do not abandon their goals because progress feels slow. Their standards remain steady even when their emotions fluctuate. This is what discipline really looks like. It is choosing the right action long after the excitement has disappeared. Anyone can stay committed when life is easy. Real character is revealed on the days when nothing feels enjoyable, yet you continue anyway. Seneca believed that a peaceful life comes from governing yourself rather than your impulses. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you strengthen your character. Every time you honor your principles instead of your feelings, you become someone you can genuinely trust. High standards also shape your relationships. You stop chasing people who only value you when it is convenient. You stop accepting one-sided friendships. You stop settling for environments that constantly drain your energy. Instead of asking, "How can I make them stay?" you begin asking, "Do they deserve a place in my life?" There is quiet confidence in someone who knows what they will and will not accept. They do not need to announce their boundaries because they consistently live by them. Others quickly learn that respect is not optional. It is the foundation of every relationship. The truth is simple. Your emotions will change every day, but your standards determine the direction of your life. When your standards become stronger than your moods, your confidence stops depending on circumstances. It becomes part of who you are. And once your standards are firmly established, you become incredibly difficult to influence. That leads to the sixth habit, becoming impossible to manipulate. Remember, becoming attractive is not about changing how the world sees you. It is about changing the way you carry yourself when no one is watching. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, peace over chaos, and character over approval, you become a little stronger than you were yesterday. That is the quiet power Stoicism has always pointed us toward, and it is a journey that lasts a lifetime. If today's reflection resonated with you, don't stop here. One of the videos on your screen right now will help you take the next step toward building an unshakable mind and a life guided by wisdom instead of emotion. I encourage you to keep learning, keep growing, and continue investing in the person you are becoming. Thank you for spending this time with me and for being a valued part of the Psychresto Mind community. Until next time, take care of your mind, protect your peace, and remember, your greatest strength has always been within you.